So in the instruction booklet for Mario Land 2 Six Golden Coins, it says that while Mario was away fighting Tatanga in Sarasa Land, Wario sort of took control of Mario's castle, and so the game starts. The 6 golden coins are sort of spread into the 6 different worlds, and so on. And I guess the first thing that made me think something strange was going on is that in Japanese funerals, that is to say, Buddhist Japanese funerals, 6 coins are placed near the body of the deceased or in the casket, and the deceased use those 6 coins to pay their way through into the other world through a river, very similar to river Styx in ancient Greek myth, where you also pay the toll and cross over to Hades, to the underworld. So here we have 6 coins which open up the gate to your own castle, which has been taken over by this sort of almost mirror opposite of yourself, that is to say, Wario. And once the coins are paid, Wario is almost exorcised out of this castle. There's a strange religious / psychological theme going on here. Especially the other thing is that Wario takes the opportunity while Mario is in Mario Land 1. And Mario Land 1 is a very strange adventure compared to other Mario adventures, because most of the worlds are not just like an ice world or a fire world or the woods, those typical video game worlds. Instead, you've got these worlds that echo popular paranormal mystery sites like Easter Island, with the mystery of its Moai faces, the Bermuda Triangle, the mysteries of ancient Egypt, and also ancient Chinese mysteries. It all seems to revolve around the unknown, the esoteric, the paranormal. I mean, Tatanga, the boss, is an alien as well. There's just this concept of alienness, alien lands, alien mystery that is confronted by the ego, Mario in this case, entering into the unconscious, I guess you could say, the unknown, the other land as well. I mean, you could also read it that Mario Land 1 is already Mario's descent into Hades, and that the 6 golden coins represents his return from that place. So the interesting thing is that while Mario is down in the unconscious, Wario resurfaces. This is so typical of, for example, Jungian psychoanalysis, when you explore your unconscious, repressed content can come back up. It's also like, because Mario Land 2 is the first appearance of Wario, it's almost like Wario had been locked up in Mario's unconscious, and only when Mario goes down into these unknown lands that Wario sort of bubbles up. But because Wario has been repressed, he's a shadow. I mean, he seems like a shadow element to Mario. There's something that Mario can't accept about having Wario live in his own castle. So it's like the castle, the house, seem to be symbols for the body, the self, or the soul. And now, Mario's consciousness has this unwanted visitor in it, Wario. And Mario is trying to find a way of reclaiming his identity, his self. And it's interesting how this is done, because Wario is not killed at the end of the game. And I think this is nice because Wario, the second after this game ends, you begin to play as Wario in Super Mario Land 3 Wario Land. It's almost as if the second Mario regains his self, Wario doesn't go back down into the unconscious. Wario remains something out in the open that still needs to be accepted as a self of his own. So if we go back to the funeral theme, why a funeral? I can think of two possibilities. One is, let's say, not so much a funeral in the sense that someone dies, but some sort of a ritual, a ceremony of traveling, paying the 6 coins to travel down to Hades and back. In this case, it could be that Mario is coming back from Hades, or that Mario descends to Hades once again to meet Wario. Or it could be a funeral in the literal sense, but not in the death of Mario or Wario, but in the death of Mario's autonomy, of Mario's aloneness, the death of Mario as the only hero. The second this funeral happens, the next game is Wario Land. So suddenly Wario is in the main stage. There is something inside Mario as a heroic character has to die. Some of his self-importance has to die to give way for the other, the other as a concept to exist of its own right. So, in a nicely Buddhist sense, this funeral could be a symbolic funeral for the death of the ego, for the death of Mario's ego, which allows Wario to exist, but not to exist in the same castle. They each have their own self. What they learn at the end of the game is that this is not a battle for who keeps the castle. Mario has his castle, and Wario has his castle at the end of Wario Land. And this has nothing to do with the private property or anything like that, but more the castle as a body, as a self. They each are individuals that you don't have to have, either Mario or either Wario. It's not a choice. It's a non-duality. They can both exist at the same time in the same reality. So, in keeping with this whole theme of the body, the house, it's interesting how now, when we look at the 6 worlds where the 6 coins come from, they all have something to do with this. For example, Turtle Zone. I mean, to begin with the fact that a turtle is clearly an animal who lives inside its own shell. There's this thing of the shell of the turtle is its home, but at the same time it's his body. So it symbolizes this perfectly. The turtle is living inside its own self. But inside Turtle Zone, once you enter Turtle Zone, there is a whale. And inside the whale, there's Paco, an octopus. So there's a body inside a body inside a body. Almost like in those typical myths of world creation where the universe stands on top of a turtle shell, and the turtle stands on top of an elephant, and the elephant stands on top of whatever. And there's a sort of a infinitely regressing fractal thing of identities within identities, which is precisely the quest Mario is going through at this moment, a quest of identities and discovering identities within his own identity. Because to discover Wario is to admit to himself that Wario has a connection with him, that he is not just a nice, smiley plumber, but that his Wario side is a part of himself. Then the Mario zone is very clear. You've got this massive robot/toy Mario. I like the fact that it's a toy and that inside of it it's all like Lego pieces and little balls and stuff, because it also gives this impression that inside Mario's body it's a game, in the same way that the game of Mario Land is a game. And this suddenly involves the player, because it's no longer just talking about Mario, but it's talking about the player, how we are playing this game. This quest is a game, and at the same time there's something solemn about the game. There's an importance to this. And then in the Mario Zone, the boss of the Mario Zone are the 3 little pig heads. This is interesting. First, because these are the 3 little pigs inside their houses, again a symbol of the self inside its house, and the wooden house, the straw house, the brick house, how the durability of the self, and also the fact that these are pigs' heads. That's the name of the boss. It's not a complete pig, it's just the head, just the thinking head, the ego, so to speak. And the boss of this zone is exactly behind the M sign on Mario's hat. The M sign of Mario's hat is like his ego identity, the sort of, it's me, Mario, it's having your own initials on your hat is clearly, of course it's a game mechanism to, design in order to distinguish the characters and stuff. But that, to me, doesn't prevent it from having some meaning. That if you walk around with your own name stamped on your hat, there's some sort of self-importance in that is being attacked by the presence of Wario, by the presence of the 3 little pigs inside the symbol of his identity. Then, moving on, the pumpkin zone. Again, the jack-o'-lantern as a pumpkin that has been infused with life, a shell that has some sort of a spirit, in this case maybe an evil spirit, inside of it. Wario. Not because Wario is inherently evil, but because to Mario this is the impression Wario gives to him. And it's interesting how in the pumpkin zone the boss is Sabasa, who's this witch dressed in purple who can shoot fire out of a wand. And she reminds me so much of Kamek, even though I think Kamek hadn't even been created at this point. But there's something here, especially in her connection to the boss being Wario, because the boss isn't Bowser, Kamek is in a human form, Savasa. Oh, and of course there's a whole association of Halloween with the land of the dead, and Halloween as a moment of spirits coming back into the land of the living. Again, in the same way that Wario has come back from the unconscious into consciousness. The macro zone, a giant house, almost, it makes Mario seem small, and I find it interesting because here again, if we take the house as some symbol of the body or the self, then Mario is now too little for his own house, because there are others in his house. Wario, again, has entered into his consciousness, and now his body doesn't suit him. His body has expanded to fit two souls. I mean, in the final battle, the sprite of Wario is much bigger than Mario's sprite. It's as if something big from the unconscious has entered into consciousness and has expanded the consciousness so much that the self, the identity, feels small within it. Again, the boss of this zone is Ricky, this rat with a spiky nose. And I mean, to start with, simply the fact that rats are inhabitants of houses that are usually not welcome by the people living in the house. And at the same time, Ricky has this big spiky nose which he uses to attack. I will probably make another video simply about this whole nose thing, but I think this has something to do with Wario's big nose and a lot of other sort of nose symbology in Mario games. And then we've got the Space Zone. Again, almost like a recapitulation of Mario Land 1, because the boss is Tatanga. It's almost like this is a memory of Mario's voyage into the unconscious, or the Space Zone is Mario Land 1, almost as if the Space Zone were another possible symbolized version of this quest Mario went through. And the fact that space is the opposite of a house. There's no solid place to be in. There's no gravity. It's almost a disembodied state of being, which is this place Mario was in as Wario took over the house. Again, it's interesting how you enter this zone through the hippo, and I have no idea why, but the only thing that came to mind was how hippos in ancient Egyptian tradition, I think, have something to do with death and birth. Again, I guess a lot of things have to do with death and birth, but this again ties in perfectly, of course, with the whole funeral slash birth of Wario as an identity theme. And the tree zone, which is home to the ants, the bees, and Kurosu, the big bird at the top. And the tree has been hollowed out, it's been emptied out because all the insects are eating it from within. So the tree is being infected. It's been eaten up from within, the same way that Mario's castle is being eaten by Wario. This tree is the home of these insects, but at the same time it's the food of these insects, and there's something that needs to achieve some sort of balance. Again, these insects are bigger than normal. They're sort of supersized insects. I think the game's explanation is because of the spell Wario has cast on them. So again, there's something about big people in like a big identity in a small body, or a small identity in a big body, and the balance that can be achieved at the end of whatever this process is. And the boss, Kurosu, has this I find really interesting, because the golden coin for this zone is inside an egg. Again, like as if it weren't a coin, as if it were something that's alive, something that has to be nurtured and is brought into life through being born out of this egg. And now, in all of these 6 zones, the bosses, at least most of them I think, can be killed by hitting them with 6 fireballs. Again, the symbology of the number 6 as being the number that allows the bosses to die. Something with funerals, like the 6 coins. And at the very end of the game, after you defeat Wario, it's so interesting how Mario's castle, which had turned into Wario's castle, suddenly dissolves and sort of reforms itself into Mario Castle. And then the very last step of this transformation is the W emblem in the front of the house spins around, and it spins back into M position. I find it interesting because the castle seems to shift form from Wario form to Mario form, but the emblem is the same. It's simply sort of switched onto its opposite side. The lines that form the M and the W are the same lines. It's not replaced. So there is no direct separation between the M and the W. It's more a question of perspective. And I guess this is the final lesson that Mario learns before Wario sets off on his own journey, is that this battle cannot be won by the death of Wario or the death of Mario, because there is no choice to make. The death of Wario, if you killed the emblem with the W on, you would be killing the emblem with the M on it, because they are the same emblem. It's simply how you switch them around. And as a final thing, and I really have no idea about this, but the entrance to the castle has these 2 columns that guard the entrance in a very sort of ceremonial way, and the columns are sort of standing on a turtle's back, a Koopa back, and a Goomba's back. And I'm not sure why the Goomba, but the turtle, I mean, as I've said already, I think that this myth of the world turtle, of the universe being held on top of a turtle shell, which I think appears in Indian tradition, Chinese tradition, there's a lot of instances of this myth, and here it's being used with a Koopa that is holding the entrance to the underworld. The Goomba is a bit trickier because my only intuition is that because Goombas are mushrooms, that this has something to do with the entrance to the underworld being protected by psychedelic mushrooms, by shamanic ritual. That, or why not use a normal power-up mushroom to represent that? Well, I think if we're going to read anything into this, then simply because the castle has been taken over by Wario, so these 2 images have taken a darker side. But anyway, that's enough of me reading stuff into Mario games. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to see what people think of this.